Hello. So today's going to be a longish video. I'm trying to aim off and away from longer videos in the hopes that I make my content more accessible and that helps my channel grow. Um, but I found out about something called the Feminist Perspectives Test. Um, and like a lot of people in my generation, I love to be categorized by like tests that never give the proper nuance to every question. They just like everything's cut and dry, black and white. You got to fit in one box or the other. um then I love taking tests like that tell me you fit in this box perfectly, and I'm like, do I really? Do I? But it's always fun anyway because it makes you think more about certain questions. um and so yeah, today we're gonna think about feminism. Gonna see what my feminist perspective is. Um, so just to read the little blurb for the test, the Feminist Perspectives Test is one of the most widely used tests for determining what kind of feminist or non-feminist a person is. This version of the Feminist Perspectives Test incorporates recent advances in feminist theory by including newer types of feminism that Dr. Henley had not included in her original research. I don't know who. Oh, based on the work of Dr. Nancy Henley. I'm not actually sure who that is. Let's see. Oh, I see. I think this is Dr. Nancy Henley. So I got a PhD, John Hopkins. Career focus, linguistics, semantics, nonverbal communication, gender, power, feminist attitudes. Inspired by what she was discovering about the issues faced by women, Henley began to apply a feminist approach to language. She started to study gender dominance in language and semantics. This was eventually led to one of her most famous publications, Body Politics, Power, Sex, and Nonverbal Communication. After discovering her interest in feminism gender issues, Henley incorporated this awareness into every aspect of her work. She was named Foremother by the Association of Women in Psychology in 1984. Passed away in 2016. Okay. I think this is what the person that the test is referring to. Not entirely sure, but that's what I think. What are your feminist perspectives? For each of the following statements, indicate your level of agreement below. 60 questions. So like I said, longish video. The breakdown of the traditional family structure is responsible for many of the evils in our society. I strongly disagree with that. So it's strongly disagree, slightly disagree, neutral, slightly agree, slightly disagree. I strongly disagree with that. In fact, I think the traditional family structures were often very toxic. Patriarchal, sexist, and they didn't allow men or women to explore their full potential. So yeah. Market economies unfairly favor the skills and abilities of men. I agree with that. I think there's some level of nuance we can talk about here because, like, I think women are actually overtaking men in quite a few fields, which is remarkable given how far behind society had left them. And of course, women often have it harder in the workplace. This is a bit less true nowadays, but often it's been the case, where women are seen as less reliable employees because they're the mothers that have to take time off for when they are pregnant and so forth, or for the kids. So men have traditionally had an advantage, and they still do, I think, to a certain extent. At least the patriarchal structures that incentivized men to work more than women are still there. Yeah. Since women comprise half of the world's population, it is only natural that women should possess half of the world's wealth. Since women comprise, okay, that's a strange question. I don't even know what it's quite getting at with that. So if you disagree with that, then I guess you would say that women should have more wealth. But if you agree with it, then women and men should have an equal amount of wealth. Yeah, I don't even really know how to answer that question. That's just strange. I guess I'll slightly disagree. I think I'll slightly disagree. Because I think it's about I mean, if women produce more economic value, then they're, well, it's not. I was about to say something incorrect. It's not necessarily a thing about like, oh, wealth has to be equally distributed among men or women. It's more about women and men should have the same opportunities to get the same amount of wealth. So yeah, as a rule of thumb, women are too emotional to be heads of state. Strongly disagree. I mean, do you see the two presidential candidates running? They're both angry old men. And I mean, Trump is just a narcissist. And so any little thing will trigger his, sense of entitlement and sense of entitlement. Did I say that twice? His high level, his insane level of self-importance. And then Joe Biden, I mean, news stories have come out that he, yells and snaps at staffers and gets very angry behind the scenes. But then, like, when women just aren't like, I mean, women, it's more socially acceptable for women to show their emotions, but they're judged, I think, very harshly for sharing those emotions. Like, they're seen as, yeah, these emotional beings. They don't think rationally. Female hysteria was a thing for that reason, right? Like, particularly anger. Women are not allowed to show anger. Like, I remember when that story came out, Marianne Williamson. There was some piece that was trying to slander her because supposedly she got angry with some of her staffers and some of her some of the people working on her campaign, and this was supposed to imply, oh, well, maybe Marianne Williamson isn't fit to be president. She's getting a little angry, kind of sus, bro. And it's like, again, there's plenty of reports that Biden gets super angry with his White House staff and whatnot. So, it's the same behavior, basically. It's just like, oh, Marianne Williamson's a woman, therefore, to heck with her. She can't be angry. She can't get angry at staffers. But when Joe Biden does it, it's okay. It's okay. But no, there's no evidence that women are more emotional, more irrational than men. I mean, at bottom, all humans are pretty irrational, I think. But most of us have some capacity to be rational, to be reasonable. And yeah, so men see women as property in the same way they see the environment as a storehouse of natural resources. Um, ye... These are strange questions. Oh my goodness. I think I agree with that. I mean, I think I agree that men often view women through the benefits that women can provide for them. Not necessarily economic, quite often, sexual. Like, women are evaluated on, are they, would I want to have sex with her or not? If yes, higher caliber woman. If no, lower caliber woman. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about that earlier today, actually. I don't know. But I mean, I think that's men. I think are prone. They're very prone to dehumanize women, and to only see women through the male gaze. I think the phrase is so. I mean, and in a good portion of human history across the world, I mean, women were in fact property of their husbands. Well, originally property of their fathers. Children were basically property of their fathers, and then the women were married off, and they were therefore the property of their husbands then. But I think ideas like this still infiltrate people's behavior, and they still warp people's psyches. And yeah, no, there's a lot of women out there there's a lot of men out there who just have despicable views about women. And so yeah, I think I would slightly agree with this statement, that men see women through the prism of economic and or personal value. So yeah. Oh, and also, well, part of this might sort of be related. I don't know. I guess we could put this in economic and personal value, honestly. But your lineage, right? I mean, again, people are obsessed. People are terrified of death, terrified of being forgotten, not existing anymore, and it's one reason having children is so nice, right? Because you pass on your name, you pass on your legacy, and so that's another way that men view women as is their tickets to the man's legacy, and tickets to um, tickets to passing that their wealth, their property, maybe their business along to the children someday. So yeah, these are weird questions. I looked at a couple of them last night, but women cannot truly be themselves while they live in a society run by men. I agree with that. They can do their best to try to be themselves, and depending on the country you live in, and depending on your economic status, you might have more or less of ability to try to be yourself. But in a patriarchal structure, women will always be oppressed. They will always be demonized. They will always be infantilized. Just the incentives there, like the incentives of the power structures are there to keep women in their place, so to speak. So yeah, there will always be constraints on what women, how women can express themselves in a patriarchal society. And I mean, that's just kind of how power structures work. That's not some conspiracy theory. It's just power structures are incentivized to keep some certain groups in power, keep other groups out of power, to perpetuate certain ideologies, to demonize and minimize other ideologies. Like, to me, this is just sort of common sense. I mean, I guess you could read someone like Foucault if you want to think about it in a more abstract philosophical way, but that's I think that's just very basic truism in a way. So, yes, I agree with that. Women should enter into lesbian relationships as a way to resist patriarchy. I'm going to slightly disagree with that. I don't entirely understand political lesbianism. I mean, I understand the history behind it. I understand it in the context of the feminist movement, but I don't know why anyone would engage in political lesbianism in 2024. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine anybody doing it, really, just from my perspective, because, like, as I understand it anyway, like, people don't choose their sexualities. And so to turn to say, oh, I'm a woman and I'm only going to date and sleep with women, not because I'm necessarily a lesbian, but because I want to make a statement about not needing men, or I want to make a statement about my loyalty to my sisters, or something like that. That's just, it's so strange to me. It's very foreign to me. I don't. I'm skeptical of sexuality being used in that fashion. Like I said, that's more. It's more. It's like behavioral lesbianism in a way. It's like it's nothing necessarily innate about the person. And, like, I mean, I don't think most people believe in, like, some scenario where, like, men and women completely go their separate ways, like they live in different societies. There have been people who believe that, in the same way that there have been people who are, racial separatists. So there have been people who are like, yeah, men should be in their own society, women should be in their own society, and we'd stay apart. We can't be together. Again, that's, I don't think, most people's feelings on the matter, and that seems foolhardy to me, in the same way that, like, racial separatism seems foolhardy to me. Like, I feel like the point, in large degree, is not to ignore our differences, not to ignore differences in identity, but to allow for a society where all people's identities and experiences are respected. And I mean, we're nowhere near that, sad to say, but I think in 2024, you can, if you're a lesbian, you can live your life as a lesbian. If you are a straight person, you can live your life as a straight person, and you can both be feminist. You can both be fighting for women's rights. and you can both be on an equal footing. There's no real reason to turn lesbianism into a behavior that you choose just to make a political statement. I think I'm repeating myself here, so I should probably move on. But a woman can be just as emancipated as a household wife as she could as a CEO. See, this is why I like and dislike tests like this. It never allows for the proper nuance, but then it makes me try to think about the nuance. So it's like, it helps me, I guess, get a better understanding of my own views, even if they're not reflected in the test itself. I would say slightly agree. Slightly agree. And I'm going to slightly agree. I haven't really been distinguishing these the differences between slightly agree, disagree, slightly disagree. But in this instance, I will, because again, the history of traditional family structures has been harmful to women and has prevented them from seeking other opportunities. So I think a lot of women don't want to be housewives these days. And I perfectly understand why, and I respect the hell out of those people. But as I understand feminism, feminism is about choice, women's choice, and in many areas. And I think one of those choices is, well, do I want to have a career? Do I want to be a housewife? Do I want to try to juggle a family and a career? Do I want neither? I think that's the point of women's liberation. If a woman wants to be a housewife and she's comfortable with it and there's no like coercion involved, she's not being forced to, and she is happy in that role, like she feels fulfilled in that role, then I don't think I can tell her no. But if someone feels like they have to be a housewife, I would tell them, no, you certainly don't have to. And if someone's being coerced into being a housewife, then that's incredibly unethical. But like I said, it's just women should be allowed to live the lives that they think work best for them. So this is going to take a while. My voice is going to give out probably. A woman who engages in BDSM with her partner is making herself a slave to the patriarchy. These are some spicy questions over here. Spicy questions. I would I would strongly disagree, I think. And I think I would strongly disagree because, and I'm not, I'm not an expert in the BDSM community or the lifestyle, by any means. Having said that, as I understand it, a healthy BDSM relationship, lifestyle, activity, healthy BDSM activity, or a healthy relationship that includes BDSM aspects to it, um, requires both parties to be, on equal footing, um, which is to say, like, both parties are supposed to have a say in um, how the relationship is going, progressing, and what is done in these various roles and whatnot. And they're supposed to be like people are people have safe words in case they need to tap out or something. And there's supposed to be agreement beforehand, supposed to be good communication beforehand and during and after. That doesn't mean everyone does those things. There's BDSM relationships or BDSM activity that go awry, but if there's healthy communication and boundaries and safe words and parties are consenting, I don't think that's makes a woman a slave to the patriarchy. I think it means she's expressing herself sexually, and if she happens to um, choose certain roles that are more submissive, um, then that's what she's into. um, and that should be respected. Um, yeah, I mean, I believe people should be sexually liberated. Um, Sexual evolution never didn't go far enough. Men and women are equally responsible for climate change. Well, I think I have to strongly disagree with that, just because more men have been in power um, in the years that were leading up to the climate situation we find ourselves in now. Like statistically, that's just a fact. Men are more responsible for climate change than women. Um, and so, but by which I mean the world leaders and the politicians that could have, you know, been thinking about this uh, long ago and been trying to implement policies that minimized uh, our contributions to climate change weren't doing it, and most of those people were men. So, um, and also, I mean, I don't have the numbers to back this up off the top of my head, but I would also suspect that men engage in all kinds of activities that uh, have a greater cause greater harm to the climate, like driving fast motorcycles or big trucks super fast and over long distances. Anyway, it is not possible to be a feminist and right wing. I would uh, I would agree with that. Um, I'm kind of whiff waffling in my head between agree and strongly agree. Um, because I think feminism is meant to fight for all women. Um, But that doesn't mean feminism should compromise some of its values that, say, conservative or right-wing women don't like. Like, feminism should be benefiting those women, but those women just don't entirely agree or understand why their right-wing beliefs are overall hurting them and hurting women in general. I think I'd say strongly agree. I mean, there are going to be conservatives who say, "Oh, I'm a feminist," or you can. There are like conservative women in Islam who they fight fiercely, say, for their right to cover up, and like they they want to cover up, and they think that that's an aspect um, of women's free choice. And I mean, admittedly, I'm somewhat skeptical of that, if I'm being honest. But I mean, we can't prevent women legally from covering up if that's what they choose to do. So there are women who do try to reconcile these two things. I don't think they're ultimately reconcilable. But there will be people who have incorporated some aspects of feminism into their right-wing worldview. So, I mean, technically, like, people can like claim to be both, but I think the ideas are the overarching ideas, the overarching ideologies, I should say, are fundamentally in tension. If you're picking and choosing, which aspects of which ideology you will and will not follow, okay, maybe you can find some way of meshing together the stuff you've cherry picked. But overall, feminism doesn't lead in a right wing direction. A socialist restructuring of businesses is necessary for women to assume. Cat. I actually have to go pee, so I'm gonna be right back. This video is gonna take a while, like I said. So I'm gonna take a very short break. I have returned. So where were we? Also, cat in the background. Not mine, but I do live with the multiple cats that aren't mine, but I like cats, so I don't mind. I was just making sure that I was actually not unmuted, and I am, so good. Socialist restructuring of businesses is necessary for women to assume equal leadership with men. I tend to think so, yes. Like, Like, I don't have some magic bullet or some like step-by-step guide for how to become like a post-capitalist society. Um, but I do think that uh, all things being equal, all other things being equal, we need to move off and away from capitalism into something else. But particularly a society in which there's a more democratic economy, in which the average person has a greater say in economic policy, and in which and a society in which the economic policy does truly benefit, all of us or as many people as possible, rather than um, wealthy business owners. So now a lot of like socialist countries, they haven't done great with. I mean, it's been a mixed bag when it comes to women's lib. But in principle, I I think a socialist a government of sorts would be better for allowing everybody to be on equal footing, and allowed everybody to assume equal leadership in their community. Geez, there are only two genders. I have to strongly disagree with that. I'm going to move on. It is a man's duty to maintain order in his family. Strongly disagree with that. Move on. Concepts of sexual orientation, such as heterosexuality and homosexuality, were largely invented to satisfy male ways of thinking. I would agree, I think. I mean, like, both sexuality and gender are sort of complicated topics because, it's not entirely nature and it's not entirely nurture, for either. I mean, like, there's a spectrum of like sexual behavior in the species, and there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of like gender identity across the species, but the way people express themselves and the way they label themselves, it's very dependent on culture. Like we call Julius Caesar bisexual, but it's kind of misleading, because the ancient Romans didn't have a concept of bisexuality, so like that's us putting a contemporary label on a figure from the past. I mean, at most you could say he engaged in bisexual behavior, but so yeah, I would slightly agree with that. The labels we give sexuality are pretty culturally dependent, and of course the idea that like people are either gay or straight, heterosexual or homosexual, goes back to some longstanding biases in Western culture. Excuse me. So yeah. Feminism should be just as much about fighting inequalities based on race, class, age, and religion as it is about fighting inequalities based on gender. I agree. I strongly agree, actually. I know intersectionality is, well, now it's not working. I am technologically challenged. Yeah, there we go. I know intersexuality is the boogeyman these days. Conservatives are screaming and whining and crying and peeing their pants over this term. Um, but I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that um, people, depending on you know, well, I guess I put it like this: people's identities are comprised of many things, and those identities are in have similar and different um, relationships with the power structures, or the power structures have different or similar relationships with various identities. And so people, some people may be higher or lower up on the ladder of power um, than others. So a black man he benefits from patriarchy, but he um, is harmed by uh, institutional racism. Whereas a white woman um, benefits from white supremacist ideology, white supremacist. Uh, she benefits from the power structures having a white supremacist leaning, but she is harmed actively by that same system's sexist uh, biases. So, and you can just, keep adding different people, different groups of people into that chain, um, and that makes perfect sense to me. So I feel like feminism should be fighting for um, women of various races, classes, ages, and religions, and so forth. Um, Again, feminism should benefit all women, ideally. Prostitution grows out of the male culture of violence and the male need to own and possess objects. I would whiff-waffling between slightly disagree and slightly agree. Um, because that, historically speaking, that sounds very plausible. I mean, in other words, like, men have used their power to gain sexual favors for women for, as far back as humans have been around. And so, and I'm sure, some people have, for whatever reasons, slavery or economic need or something, have um, given up their bodies to other people, or had their bodies had their bodily autonomy violated by other people for the aggressor's sexual gratification. And of course, anybody who turns to prostitution out of a desperate need, and that's a tragic story. No one should have to sell their body to pay the bills, or have to sell their body to make sure their kids have something to eat or something. But I do support the legalization of prostitution. And I think we should liberate sex work. Like, I don't think sex work has to be bad. It often is, or often has been, but I don't think it has to stay that way. And if someone wants to go into that line of work, I think they should be allowed to, and I think it should be regulated, like other fields of work, to minimize abuse and minimize risk, particularly risk of STDs. So yeah, I don't really know where that puts me. I guess I would slightly disagree, but I don't know. Slightly disagree, slightly agree. You could put me in either category, and I would be comfortable with that, really. And I'm only putting slightly disagree just because, like I said, I do believe prostitution should be legal. That's the main reason I put that. 18 of 60. Oh gosh. Putting women in positions of power would bring about new modes of government that promote peace. I doubt it. I mean, we're all human, and I think many humans, almost all humans, there are very few humans that have existed that aren't susceptible to being corrupted by power. It's just, I think it's very hard. I mean, I've never been in any major position of power. I can't speak from personal experience, just, staying up to date in politics, reading history, and so forth. It does seem like the human brain just doesn't know how to compute when they have a great deal of power, and people's incentives change when they're in those situations. I think they become more short-sighted. They become more selfish. They become more invested in maintaining whatever power they have gained, or getting even more power. And I don't think women are much different in that regard. I think women are probably just as susceptible to being corrupted by power as men. Using brain imaging to legitimize stereotypical gender roles can never be scientifically justified. How do you legitimize stereotypical gender roles through brain imaging? I think I strongly agree with that. Yeah, I just have to look more into that. I'm not even sure how you would go about doing that. I mean, I'm sure, I know there are people out there that are like, oh yeah, scientifically speaking, women are just inferior. Women are just meant to be in the home as mothers, and wives, me. And it's like, no, not really. Yeah, I wish I wish I had more to say on that front. But no, I mean, if scientific discovery or a scientific study were trying to legitimize like stereotypes, we should be skeptical of that. Science should not be that should not be the business of science. I mean, we can try to understand where these stereotypes come from, but it's not about legitimizing them. Or it shouldn't be. The ideal heterosexual relationship is one where the man obtains economic success while the woman looks after the home and the family's needs. Strongly disagree. Next. Western feminists should not meddle in gender equality issues related to Islam. Oh, another spicy one. I think I actually touched on this for a second a little bit ago, but I think women well, when you take like the hijab, for example, and the burqa. I don't think women should be forced to wear those, and so I'm very much against the governments that around the world that try to force women into minimizing themselves and hiding away and whatnot. And actually, that there's been quite a few. There's a growing number of women protesting in Iran, for example, for protesting against Iran's requirement that women cover up in public, and with and many of these women are doing this great risks to themselves. So it's remarkable. And so I think there's a great deal of misogyny in the history of Islam. There's a great deal of misogyny in the cultural practices in Islam. And I don't think it's improper for feminists to point that out. I would say, though, well, a couple things. Anyone who's like, yeah, we should ban, the hijab and burqa because of feminism, like, you're insane. Stop it. You can't ban people from doing something like that legally. I mean, you could try, people, but I think that's a form of paternalism and only counterproductive to your cause. Just makes people feel more attacked and vilified. And I mean, and the West has a major Islamophobia problem. That's hard to say. The West has a major Islamophobia problem, and that's why countries like France try to do things like that. But if women want to embrace, more conservative, more fundamentalist Islam and want to cover up, I can't prevent them from doing that. Or I don't think I should be politically preventing them from doing that. And I think that, Western feminists should try to keep in mind that change generally comes from within, not from without. So I think when we're looking at Islamic cultures, for example, we can have our opinions on them, but whether we're right or whether we're wrong, can't impose our values on another culture. We have to allow that culture to. We have to allow people inside that culture to change that culture. So, who's primarily responsible for dealing with the misogyny in Islam? Women in Islam, women in Middle Eastern countries, women from Muslim families. And it's not just that they're more responsible for fighting it. They're more likely to successfully fight it. They're more likely to be able to have some sway in that because they already have their foot in their door. They're already part of that community. So I Slightly agree. When people speak of sexual assault and violent crime among minorities, they must approach those topics sensitively, lest they risk marginalizing women of color too. When people speak, sorry, I didn't entirely register what that was saying. When people speak of sexual assault and violent crime among minorities, they must approach these topics sensitively, lest they risk marginalizing. Strongly agree. No comment. White feminists are too concerned with empowering themselves and not enough with empowering women of color. Yes. I mean, do I really have to say much with that? Like, again, we live in a society that we live in a society in which the power structures still incentivize white supremacy, and many white women are very much stuck in their own bubble, particularly cis white women, and yeah, they many white feminists are not aware of either how their own actions can negatively affect like women in minority groups, or they don't reach out and build those bridges and help women um, in these minority groups have more of a voice and a say and an influence. This is going to take a while to do a speed round. Using man to mean both men and women is one of the many ways in which sexist language diminishes women's potential. Strongly agree. It's unbecoming of women when they try to be assertive like men. Strongly disagree. The cultural conception that a real man is tough and daring should be replaced by the conception that a real man is caring and compassionate. I agree. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being like tough and daring. There's nothing wrong with being caring and compassionate either. Like, women and men should be allowed to be both. Someone who is ethnically white can still identify as a woman of color. Do I want to drop this bomb, this hot, spicy take here? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm gonna say it. I think transracialism is a thing. I don't have time to go into that in great detail here. Got too many questions to get through, but I think transracialism is a thing, and that would mean an ethnically white woman could still identify as a woman of color in certain circumstances. But that's a very, very controversial thing to say. And them is fighting words right there. Climate change and patriarchy are two sides of the same coin. Strongly agree. Science views the universe as a matter to be used in much the same way as men view women as objects to be used. I agree. Science hasn't escaped the biases in the power structures and hasn't escaped sexist and racist language and rhetoric. Sorry, I'm plugging in my laptop. Almost all fields of study and areas of inquiry and expression haven't escaped these biases. I mean, I wouldn't say like science is inherently sexist and racist. Excuse me. You can have a anti-racist, anti-sexist science, or non-racist, non-sexist science. Insofar as there is a God, it is more likely that she is female than male. I'm going to remain neutral on that one. Because I would put disagree. I would put strongly disagree because I don't believe in God, but I don't want the test to interpret that as me thinking God is more likely to be male or female. I don't believe God exists, so I don't believe God is either. And if a higher power does exist, the idea that they'd be a male or a female or a man or a woman that makes no sense to me. Women are generally better people than men. When I was a little kid, I had a major bias in favor of women. I thought women were just inherently better, and men were just kind of, garbage by definition. And that was obviously I was raised a boy as a trans woman, so I definitely felt like, oh, I'm a man or I'm a boy, so I'm just inherently worse than all the women around me. Not that I identify as a man anymore, so it's neither here nor there. But I am going to leave that as neutral because I think sorry, this ad's bothering me. Is it not gonna? Okay, the ad's not going away. Is it? It's not going away. Okay, I tried. I think I'm gonna leave it as neutral because, like I said, men and women are human, and I think that implies that there are men that are good people, there are men that are not so good people. There are women that are good people, there are women that are not so good people. So, I mean, I think men are more likely to be, make reckless decisions, and I think some of the worst people in history have mainly been men. This is just a random example, but I'm like almost all serial killers are men, right? But I'll leave it as neutral because I think if you think about human nature, or however you want to phrase it, I think women and men are really not incredibly different at the end of the day. The oppression of the environment as done through pollution and industrialization mirrors the oppression of women in society. I agree. Women have a special bond with nature and the environment that most men are blind to. I don't think so, no. I mean, insofar as I guess a society that oppresses women is also a society that doesn't take care of its environment, which is true of our society historically. I think many feminists have been involved in the environmental rights, or in the environmentalist movement. Environmental rights. That's not a phrase, I don't think. Many feminists have been involved in the environmentalist movement. I guess slightly disagree, but I don't think. I mean, again, I think some people have a connection to nature. Some people, I mean, it's in our genes, so to speak. Like we all have, we all come from ancestors who lived in nature, But yeah, nature's one of those words. It's like it's such an ambiguous term. What does nature even mean anymore? It's very unclear. But I think men or women can, in principle, have an equally positive relationship with nature or equal connection with nature. Women of color are oppressed by white standards of beauty. Strongly agree. Women who have been lesbian at one point but have transitioned into bi or heterosexuality are generally victims of anti-feminist backlash. Women who transitioned are generally victims of anti-feminist backlash. Yes. Strongly agree if I understand the question. I mean, people who don't fit into people whose sexualities don't fit into a nice, neat little box are mistreated in this culture. And again, as long as I understand the question correctly, which again I think is saying like heteronormativity harms these women for supposedly, I guess, going back and forth, like not being one thing or the other, or having their sexuality change over time. You're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be, oh, you're gay and you're gay forever. You're straight forever. And bi people don't exist. And that's nonsense, of course. Many lesbians, in fact, have dated men for a good bit of their lives before they realized they were lesbians. It's not an uncommon experience, in fact, for lesbians to not realize they're lesbians until later in life. I mean, that's true for a lot of queer people in general. It's, just because, heteronormativity and cisnormativity tells you, oh, yeah, you're this thing and you're that thing, and because everyone else is this thing or that thing. And so it's very hard to find your identity. It's very hard to individuate yourself in those conditions. But yes, and bisexuality is real, by the way. Just to be clear, bisexuality is real. We need to say that till the cows come home. I don't know why it's so hard for people to realize that. And if your sexuality changes throughout your life, that's totally hecking valid. Marriage is a perfect example of men's need to own and oppress women. I'd slightly agree insofar as I said, the institution historically has been gross and corrupt, but ideally, marriage doesn't have to be that. 37 of 60. We're close. We're close. Office culture is organized around men's oppression of women. Strongly agree. Personalities and behaviors of women and men in our society have developed to fit the needs of advanced capitalism. Agree. That kind of goes back to the nature versus nurture question, which very silly question. I mean, it only makes sense in very when you ask about specific traits, but when you ask oh, are humans more nature or nurture? It's you can't answer that. It's both in that case. If you're talking about the whole human person and the whole human personality, it's both. Yep, my voice is giving out. Ugh. Capitalism nudges women to place men's needs ahead of their own. Strongly agree. Romantic love brainwashes women into subordination. Slightly agree. Again, I don't think romantic love inherently has to, but This is true historically, and we still experience remnants of that today. Assuming that all women have vaginas is just another way of keeping women in line with what men think they should be. Strongly disagree. Some men have vaginas, some women have penises. Get over it. Capitalism is inherently sexist. Strongly agree. Heterosexuality is the only natural sexual preference. As a bisexual, I have to strongly disagree. Positing biological explanations for gender differences is just another way of keeping women down. Slightly agree, just because, I mean, again, like, partly nature, partly nurture, right? Like, what makes someone a woman, what makes someone a man, partly has to do with just innate sort of variations. Other parts of it are, how does culture expect certain people to express themselves, and how does it expect certain people to live their lives? So, if a country has compulsory military conscription, that conscription should apply to men and women equally. I would slightly agree. I mean, if women can, pass the same physical tests as the men, then yeah. But the men and women who can't pass those physical tests, shouldn't be conscripted. No duh. Using he as a shorthand for he or she is convenient and harmless. I disagree. Person can change their gender depending on their mood or the social situation they find themselves in, i.e., be gender fluid. Strongly agree. Pornography degrades all women by exploiting female sexuality. Disagree. I'm kind of whiff-waffling between agree and slightly disagree and strongly disagree. But again, as I'm saying for a lot of these things, pornography doesn't necessarily have to be degrading. But some of it is, some of it has been. And there is such a thing as an ethical porn consumption. It's something I'm not super familiar with, so I can't comment on it extensively, but that's, for people who are interested in looking into it more. But slightly disagree. Because I don't think it degrades all women. Pornography, I mean. And nor does pornography have to be inherently degrading to anybody. Gender roles are part of a larger patriarchal system of power, which seeks to keep women down. Strongly agree. I've been saying that this whole video. Oh, shit. Oh, I cussed. I'm trying not to cuss on. The more I record videos on the internet, the more I'm cussing. It's unfortunate. Beautiful, young, and thin women are complicit in the oppression of other women if they use their qualities to obtain preferable treatment from men. I don't. I don't think so. Like, if a young woman wants to, I don't know, a young, conventionally attractive woman wants to get ahead in the world by having a sugar daddy, don't see anything wrong with that. And I don't think that's necessarily being complicit in other women's oppression. BDSM acts are not just a matter of individual choice, since they are reenacting of the way white men have historically treated women of color. Slightly disagree. Like I said, ideally, a BDSM relationship is all about communication and respect. So, I'm not here to demonize BDSM overall. Racism and sexism combined as a system of double oppression for women of color. I was defending intersectionality earlier, so I strongly agree. Anyone who is not white male is in some sense oppressed in our society. Strongly agree. I mean, even white men are not. I mean, the power structures are on their side more. Like, they have the most freedom and leeway in their lives to do what they want, but even they are not allowed to have express their full potential. So, even men. Patriarchy hurts men too. Obviously, it doesn't hurt them in the same way, but it does hurt them. Feminism is focused too much on the status of women who are white and well educated, and not enough on the struggles of women of color. Strongly agree. Men prevent women from becoming political leaders through their control of economic and political institutions. Strongly agree. Women should separate into all-female communes as a way to renounce male domination. Strongly disagree. Saying that some groups are naturally better than others at something is more about the needs of the privileged to justify their privilege than it is an accurate reflection of reality. Strongly agree. Making women economically dependent on men is capitalism's subtle way of encouraging exploitative relationships. Strongly agree. Women should have the freedom to sell sex if they want. Strongly agree. Last question. One quick break. Be right back. Last question. Then we get to see the results. I'm only an hour and 18 in. Oh, that's not bad. I wish I were better at talking extemporaneously. I'm hoping through my making more YouTube videos, I'll get more used to it. Not super great at it, and my voice isn't super engaging, so. Anyway, let's finish this off. Love between two women is purer than a love relation between a man and a woman. Strongly disagree. Finish. Let's see what we got here. Alrighty, we got so this is my percentage of the kinds of feminisms I am a part of. 4% conservative / non-feminism. Makes sense. 55% liberal feminism. 82% radical feminism. 75% socialist feminism. 45% cultural feminism. 71% women of color feminism, 33% lesbian feminism, 79% ecofeminism, 85% intersectional feminism, and 88% postmodern feminism. And doesn't, I guess, yeah, it gives little explanations. Well, I'll go through these quickly, I guess. Might as well. Postmodern feminism challenges legitimacy of supposedly objective knowledge, despite biology, brain science, personality differences. They believe that such so-called universal truths are not value-free, but in fact manufactured, justify patriarchal norms in society. Postmodern feminism thus contests classical thinking by highlighting that there are many domains of experience that are not captured by the prevailing scientific modes of thought. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think most people nowadays, unintentionally, without realizing it, are postmodernists. And you can't get away from postmodernism. I think it tore down too many walls. But I don't know. I think there's a way to move past postmodernism into something else, but that's a topic that's for another day and mostly beyond me at this point. Intersectional feminism believes that each person is characterized by their unique placement in an overlapping system of social identities that render them prone to oppression or privilege. I said this earlier in a less eloquent way. Not just male privilege, but privilege based on age, race, wealth, beauty, and health are thus legitimate points of concern for intersectional feminists. Anytime someone is rendered invisible or powerless due to their social identities, they should be listened to and understood with the aim of ending their oppression. So, yeah, I have those my numbers between those two. Postmodern feminism and intersectional feminism are pretty close, 88 and 85%. Feminism seems humanity's exploitation of the natural environment as a patriarchal male mode of consciousness. Ecofeminists thus see a connection between the degradation of the natural environment and subordination of women by men. They place an emphasis on the identity of the woman linked to Mother Earth, with many believing that only women or feminine values can show us a genuine alternative to the ecologically and socially destructive system we are living in. I mean, I don't believe women are linked to Mother Earth or whatever. That's a bit too much of woo-woo for me. I tend to aim off and away from that spiritual side of the environmental movement. But, there is a connection between subordination of women by men and degradation of the natural environment, historically and ideologically. So that was 79% for that one. Lesbian feminism, that was, I think, not my lowest one, but my second to lowest one, it looks like. Lesbian feminism sees heterosexuality as intertwined with male domination and challenges the perception of heterosexual love as normal. They see lesbian relationships as a way to free themselves from male oppression and sometimes advocate the segregation of women into all female communes where they can rid themselves of patriarchal norms and values. Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't really get that perspective. I mean, the love between two like women, whether maybe they lesbians, bi, pan, whatever, it's just as valid as any other form of love. And I hope to, in my lifetime, do what I can to contribute to people living in a society where, women, lesbians, bi women, dating women, like, can have those, can, can be respected in the same way, and can have the space to um, express that love and live out that love. But I mean, I don't think heterosexual women or bi women should avoid dating men if they so choose. I mean, they should try to avoid unhealthy relationships, and both parties in the relationship should recognize maybe when they're being influenced by patriarchal biases. But surely there's a way to liberate heterosexual relationships from sexism and patriarchy. So I think so that was 33%, excuse me. Women of color feminism. Women of color feminists hold that race and sexism combine to form a mode of double oppression for women of color than white feminists could never understand. I said that earlier. Women of color feminists are often critical of white feminists, which they see as too focused on their own problems while ignoring the issues of poverty, racism, and ethnocentrism that women of color face. I mean, I couldn't put that better if I tried. And again, that was at 71%. No, I mean, it's so many people underestimate how powerful racism still is, and just the biases against racial minorities that still exist in various communities. So this includes like the queer community too. Like, trans women of color are have it way harder than like someone like me who's a white trans woman. And if we don't recognize that, if white feminists and white trans women and whatnot don't recognize that they're black and brown and sisters have it worse than them, and if we don't fight for them to have an equal seat at the dining room table, then we are culpable in perpetuating racism, and that's not okay. Cultural feminism. Cultural feminists believe there's a female essence centered around values such as peace, nurture, and caring. They contrast this with a male essence centered around aggressiveness and competition, which they believe is destructive to both men and women. Consequently, both men and women should stand to gain from reorganizing society among more feminine, caring lines, allowing the nature and value of women to come to the fore. And again, that was 45%. So I'm like 50, I'm close to 50-50 on that one. I don't know. I don't know how helpful it is to be like, oh, these values have a male essence and these values have a female essence. I mean, certainly nothing wrong with peace and nurturing and caring. And competition and aggressiveness are often just very, very destructive. I mean, competition, I don't think is inherently bad. And aggressiveness, I mean, there's like, I don't know what like the mild form of aggression is. just confidence, I guess. It's not aggression. It's just confidence and self-respect and advocating for yourself. But I guess it gave me like a 45% because I'm fairly committed to the idea that men and women are not that different at the end of the day in terms of their makeup or nature or whatever, and that these values can be shared. That the various values can be shared by both men and women together. So yeah. Socialist feminism. Socialist feminists hold that gender inequality cannot be separated from the inequalities caused by class oppression and capitalism. These inequalities are inseparable from each other and thus reinforce and feed each other, creating, in turn, new modes of oppression such as racism and bigotry. A socialist restructuring society is thus necessary for true equality to be achieved. Radical feminism. Radical feminists see the oppression of women as the oldest and most widespread type of domination, and therefore is the model for all subsequent modes of oppression: racism, class oppression, bigotry, and so on. Rad femmes see men as the fundamental factor in the oppression of women, as opposed to capitalism, custom, or biology. Now it's 82% rad femme. I'm actually somewhat surprised about that. I mean, when I think of radical feminists, I think of transphobes. I think of like J.K. Rowling. I think of, what they call TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. Maybe this test has a slightly different understanding of radical feminism, or maybe I answered the questions like in a way that didn't entirely reflect my views. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it means to be like, oh yeah, oppression of women is the oldest and most widespread type of domination. That's probably true, but I think that's like a question for an anthropologist, I suppose. And then models, and then the oppression of women is a model for all subsequent modes of oppression. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree with that, but again, I'm not sure what that means entirely. Like I haven't. I'd have to think more, I guess, about the connection between these various forms of oppression. I'm not sure one is more or less fundamental than the other. I mean, one might be more or less present than the other, than others, in depending on the society you're speaking of. But yeah. And then Radfem see men as the fundamental factor in the oppression of women, as opposed to capitalism, custom, or biology. I mean, it's most of those things. I'm not. Might be a little less. I don't know if I'd go as far as say it's biology, but I mean, custom, capitalism, and men are all factors in the oppression of women. Are I don't know. I think I tend to think more institutionally and like big picture. So I don't know. I feel like I would rather say something to the effect of it is more capitalism and custom than something like inherently wrong with men. So yeah, I guess I maybe I don't entirely understand what radical feminism means. As I understand it, or as I've heard about it and related to it, I didn't really care for it. So again, I'm surprised I have such a high rad fem score. Something for me to look into, I suppose. And last two things. liberal feminism. Liberal feminism believes that women and men have equal capacities and that they should have the same civil rights and opportunities. They advocate that equal treatment must be enshrined in the law and that policy should be restricted to the public sphere, reserving the rights of individuals of private life not touched by government or politics. And I got 55% for that one. Interesting. So my liberal, the test is giving me similar scores for liberal feminism and cultural feminism, with slightly higher emphasis on liberal feminism. I guess it's giving me that score because I said, yeah, women can be housewives if they want to. I mean, the public-private distinction, what goes on in private can be the concern of government and politics, or it cannot be. It depends, I think, on individual cases. But like there was a really good article. If I have the book here, actually, if I can find it. There was a really good article by a philosopher, Marilyn Friedman. Marilyn Friedman. She wrote the article "Domestic Violence Against Women and Autonomy." You should. I would recommend the viewer read that article. It's very fascinating. It basically takes up the sort of the question about like, is there a tension between prosecuting domestic abusers and like respecting women's autonomy? Like if a woman who's abused doesn't want to prosecute the abuser, should she be respected in that decision, or is that sort of an example of like a Stockholm syndrome situation and she's not thinking rationally and her autonomy's been violated anyway, so it's the community's responsibility and state's responsibility to punish the abuser? Anyway, that's a brief synopsis, but I just bring it up because she mentions, I remember that, domestic violence is society's problem. It's the government's problem. And like when a man is physically and verbally abusing his wife, that is not an act that is protected by this private sphere of influence. That is an act that is a direct attack on our political, it is a direct attack on the community, on the society, basically. And I think that's true. Last one. Conservative, non-feminist. Conservative or non-feminists are generally supportive of traditional gender roles, seeing men as naturally dominant and fit for public roles, while women should complement and support their men in private. They often justify these beliefs by reference to biological or religious arguments, arguing either that traditional gender roles involved in nature or were ordained by supreme beings. Some may also argue feminism is unfair to women since it encourages them to go against their nature. And needless to say, I don't respect any of those beliefs. Women aren't naturally submissive. They're not naturally, meant to play second fiddle to men. God doesn't ordain that. All the rest. I'm going to take a picture, though, so I remember. It's always fun sometimes to, like, wait a while and take this test again to see how it thinks your views change and evolve over time. Like I said, surprised of how high my Rad Fem score is. So I guess in conclusion, let's go top to bottom for my scores, just to review it. So, first one at the bottom, conservative non-feminist 4%, followed by lesbian feminism 33%, cultural feminism 45%, liberal feminism 55%. Then we jump all the way to women of color feminism at 71%, socialist feminism 75%, ecofeminism 79%, radical feminism 82%, intersectional feminism 85%, and postmodern feminism 88%. I am a hardcore postmodernist, apparently, at least in regards to my feminism. So, alrighty, well, this has been my the feminist perspectives test. I hope you found some education and or entertainment um, listening to this. So, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.